All right, we're live. Hey, Chad, how are you?
Good.
Good. Awesome.
Just just ready to act a couple of new things today, which is always exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully goes well. We're gonna talk about setting up your
Good.
local dev environment for Node and debugging inside of containers. So I wanted to kind of kick it off, and I'll start kind of from the beginning. We'll take a very quick whirlwind tour of creating a Docker file, running that Docker file, connected to a database, all in individual containers. And then we'll take those and put them inside of Compose. So a little bit easier to start containers up. You'll see all the parameters and flags I have to send to the Docker run command to get everything wired up. And then putting everything in Compose makes that a lot easier. So we can just do a Docker Compose up. And then we'll take a look at setting up your node runtime so you can debug into it. We're gonna use the Chrome debugger today. But yeah, cool. So I don't think
Would you,
I
hey
think
Peter,
yeah,
could you share your desktop with me
I sure could.
so I can see?
Yes. Oh, you yeah. Let me do it over here too. There's Chad. Oh, let me take you off the live.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
I can follow along at home.
Awesome. Okay. So let's start out. So I have a little Node application. Let me close this stuff down. Where we have a server.js file. I think I went over this a couple times when I do a lot of my talks, but I use this Ronin um, framework. It's a framework that I wrote. It's not you should not use it in production, but feel free to go ahead and use it and cut some PRs. It's not comprehensive. It's just what I use to make some boilerplate code a lot easier. But so here when Node starts up, we're going to connect into a database into Mongo. We create our server here, and then we're going to listen on endpoint in the services. And I use this mock server. So anything sent to this endpoint, so if it's foo, this will create a collection in Mongo. And when you do your CRUD operations, so get, put, push, those type of things, delete, it'll remove and add collections or update collections, documents inside your Mongo collection. Um, yeah, so the first thing I kind of want to do is I'm going to run. Let's build this node image, and we'll run them independently. So the first thing I want to do is I'm gonna build the image, and I'm just going to call it nodes service. And I'll build it here local. While that's building, let's take a look at the Docker file. So pretty basic Docker file. Pulling in from the node official image 12.18.3. I think I did this before, but let's do that again. So where am I getting those tags from? So if you go to hub.docker.com, and I will need to log in. Let's go over here. Go into my handy password manager. Oh, come on.
It's always the hardest part is the is getting the passwords to work. Uh,
If
so folks, if you don't have a Hub account, go take this
well,
moment to go to hub.docker.com and get a Hub account. It's a pretty cool way to store images if you need them. Free account, and also when you're logged in, um, there's you'll just get a better experience than when you're logged out because we can show you more pieces. So
yeah,
yeah, so we're going to search for Node.
cool. So yeah, so after
So we're going to use the
go ahead, Chuck.
you're going to use the official image.
Yes, correct. So you can see
Awesome.
the official image label right here. So when we come into Node, there's this tags tab where you can see all the tags, and you can filter. So if we do 12.18.3-stretch, Buster, and here's the 12.18.3 image right here. But also,
Yep.
too, if you read down these readmes, which is in the description, a lot of the official images will list out the tags, and then a lot of them will describe in here what the tags mean, and how you should
Yep.
use them. So it's good.
Yeah.
So you can see that kind of right here with the dash slim and alpine. And what is also pretty cool is you can go up and click on one of these, and this should take us into the actual Docker file that's being used,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. So if you want to go and see how some of the official images are built, you can come in here and you can read through the Docker files. This is a good way to learn how to build Docker files. You can find some really good stuff in here. Um, a lot of really interesting stuff is if you read a lot of these entry point.sh, you'll see how the command and the entry point kind of work together, and how when you override the command, the entry point kind of picks that up and either will run that command or see that it's Node and will run Node, and different things like that. Um, and
Yep.
and Chad, do you have any more color around the entry point sh?
Um, well, so entry point is like it's an easy way to, because there's not a knit and there's not um, there's just the command that you run, and so lots of times that's just, hey, my static binary or whatever. If you need something to happen, if you need accounts to be, if you needed like an account to be created, or if you needed a file to get touched, or you wanted to do something, that's where you would put it in the entry point. Um, and like you said, if you want to see some good examples, the official images are all curated and maintained by us, and so or by folks with us. So like upstream vendors, when they make changes, they get reviewed, and we make sure it's all the best practices. I think this is just a good. Lots of people, I think, get a little intimidated because they see like a million tags and there's different things.
Yeah.
Really the official image is you pick the one that makes sense to you. So you'll notice in here there's stretch and buster, which are Debian flavors. So you can align your images to whatever you're running. There's Alpine, which is Alpine is another distribution of Linux that tends to be much smaller. So the Alpine flavors will have much smaller image sizes, but it comes at a cost because Alpine doesn't use glibc by default. It uses Muscle or Musal. I don't know. It uses a
We'll go with
different
muscle.
glib. And so there can be some little minor differences for how those things work. So that's there's a trade-off there. And then there's the slims, which are like, they don't have as much stuff in them, and for a lot of things that makes a lot of sense. I think really, you can't go wrong if you're just getting started with just grabbing the number. Like I would just want 12.8.3. And the image might be a little bit bigger. It might have more stuff in it, but it's just a perfectly good way to start. And then once you've started, you can then dial in and like get the specific dialed in piece. I think another thing to go back and show the hub bits
Yeah.
is the tag that you pick. The more you qualify that tag, the more you're basically pinning it to something. You'll see like some of these have like 14.7.0 stretch versus the same things being pointed to by 14.7 or 14 or stretch. So if you grab a hold of stretch, you're always going to go with the latest version that is the stretch version. If you grab 14 stretch, you're going to grab all the minor and patch releases that are in 14. If you grab 14.7, you'll stay on the minor release of 14.7, but you'll always grab the patches. If you pin to 14.7.0, you're going to pin there and you won't take any patches, and then it'll be on to you to rev that when you want to take the next patch release. So that's another way to sort of decide, like, I'm cool. I'm just gonna. This is just dev. I'm gonna take all the updates as they come. So I'm gonna take 14.7 and I'll take all the patches. Or no, I like, this can't break. I need to be responsible for making decisions about when to update, and then pin to 14.0 14.7.0. That's another thing you can do, sort of best practice. And you'll see you can, in this case, you can pin both like for the Alpine version, you can pin both the Node version and the Alpine version. So that's why there's like tag explosion in here, is there's so many different ways to decide, like,
Yeah.
I want to stick on Alpine and I want to stick on this version of Alpine, but I want to take the new Node, or no, I want to pin both of them so that the Alpine doesn't move and the Node doesn't move until I say it moves.
Yeah. Yeah. So to your point, here's a 14.7. That's the Node. And then you have the Alpine 3.12. Then if you look down here, where's that? So 12.19 Alpine 3.9. Yep. So you can get a little crazy. And then it's also probably good to note latest. So if you don't pin like Chad was using, and I'm not sure if pin is an official term, but that's what we use.
It's the one that a lot of the package managers use, right? Like, I'm going to pin my package to this, so it seems like a good.
Yeah, that's
good word.
That's what I use all the time. I just wasn't. Yeah. So if you just do node and you don't pin it, add a tag, then you will get latest. It's the same thing as doing this, if you spelled it right.
Oh, that was cool. I forgot that VS Code does
that's
complete for tags.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to put it back to, I'm going to pin it back on 12.18.3. And 2, Chad, I get that asked a lot, like what base image should I use, right? And my thought is, always start when you're first starting out and building your Docker file, it's okay to use Node or 12.18.3, the latest long-term LTS long-term support. That's usually what I'll start with. And then you can slim that base image down after you get your image being built correctly and running correctly in a container, and then start pulling things out. Especially if you're coming from more legacy code, or you have a big code base that has all kinds of environment variables and secrets and maybe dependencies in the OS that you're running on the VM. So, whatever it is, right? You want to get everything running in a container first, and then start pulling things out. It might seem, you might say, oh, I want to start with the smallest image and put things in, but you have interdependencies all over the place, and it could be, in my opinion, it's harder to debug and get a container running, starting with slim, and not the slim image, but a bare image as possible, and adding things. Yeah.
I think the way I look at it is you should start with the officials. If you're some companies do have their own like toolchain images, and they're like, okay, so at my company, here's our node image, so you go here to get it. But if you don't have that, then I would start with an official image. So the officials there's about 180 of them. They're maintained by us and usually the upstream community. So they're best practice for both us and for the community. And then I generally start with often I know, like, I'm going to use node 12 or I'm going to use node whatever. And so then I just sort of grab like this. And I do typically pin to the patch just so that things don't move underneath me and I can move those things. And then, once you have that, then you've got the Docker file. So if you need to do something special, you can. Or you can start to look inside and say, like, oh, I can move to slim, or I can do I can do an Alpine because I don't have any dependencies on sort of glibc libraries or things that break. But it's just like writing a test, right? Like having a bunch of things you can test against to make sure that it didn't break. It's nice to start with something.
Yeah.
And then Omer, you can get some big images, like it's not uncommon for some node or especially Java. So getting a Java image that's a gig, that's completely, I won't say normal. It's normal, but there's lots of ways to slim that down. I think just getting started, like don't don't worry about image size. You'll see lots of people who are like, I got mine down to 22
Yeah.
megs, and yeah, that's fun, and we will definitely do talks about how to, like, techniques to do that. But getting started, like, just get it working,
Yeah.
and don't worry about how big it is, because
Yeah.
on your laptop it won't be that big of a deal.
Yeah. Some of those exercises sometimes become. I remember back. I was 20 years ago. I was writing some code for an agency here in town, and they had a bunch of Python or Perl, excuse me, and they had some Perl developers that must have had a competition to write, you know, a full application all on one line. So there was greps inside
Sure.
of greps, and it was short. The scripts were like a couple K, but you could not read them. Right, coming back later, it was like, what the heck is going on? Yeah, so be careful.
Yep.
Maintainability too is important. And real quick, um, so I'm probably going to mess this up. So I think you can look up semver to understand the way the versions work. And it's not something that is enforced by tags, but it's kind of a de facto standard. So you have major, it's the 12, then minor, and then your patch. Right.
Yeah.
So when Chad's saying
And
patch, he's talking about this here.
yep.
Yeah.
And so the patch, and so not every, this is one of those things that's hard about open source. Not everybody adheres to sort of the rules of semantic versioning. So typically the rules are in the major. So in this case, the 12. When that changes, all bets are off, and
Right.
they can break everything. And within a minor release, the scope of changes that can happen within that minor release are supposed to be much smaller. And so typically they won't subtract, but they may add. So like an API won't subtract an endpoint, but it potentially might add an endpoint. And then within the patch, it's supposed to be like a bug fix or a security fix. There's not supposed to be any like API changes. So typically, if you've got a project that actually follows Semver, um, the idea being it's pretty safe to take patches. It's slightly less safe to take minors, and all bets are off on a major. So I think that's kind of the guideline.
Yeah.
But for all of these things, I just sort of assume all bets are off, and you should be able to test it. So, you know,
Yeah. Cool.
I am somebody who I was talking to Peter about this last week. I upgrade pretty quickly, and I get burned by it all the time. Last week I upgraded, and a WSL2 bug put me out of commission for a couple of days. So don't be me. Upgrade more slowly, and when you have tests to do it.
Yeah, I got a Windows machine where I want to get WSL2 running and playing around with it. And I thought of you as like, all right, maybe I'm going to talk to Chad before I start updating stuff this week.
So WSL2 is fantastic, and the thing is, you like just stick on Windows 10, the latest GA release. I was on the Insiders release and like taking the bleeding edge as fast as I could, and it got me. So our friends at Microsoft are going to fix me this week, but
Cool,
I worked around it. So
cool.
let's
All
go
right,
back to this
yep.
image,
Let me go back here.
and what's going on in here.
Yeah, so pretty basic Docker file, but it's a good standard Node uh, Docker file, right? So we're going to pin to a specific version. It's not a slim, but it's a decent size. We set up our working directory. This doesn't have to be code. It could be. I see a lot of app, those type of things. I go back and forth with app and code. Then we're going to copy in our package JSON. If you're a Node developer, the package JSON tells you what dependencies you have. And then we're going to pull over a lock file. So all what a package -lock file does is locks those dependencies to the exact version that you have in your package JSON file. So same
Yep.
thing, we're talking about images, so major, minor, and patches, right? So you can use different kind of formatting in your with this hat and stuff like that to pin to a specific version. So with a lock file, it'll lock it to that exact version. It won't bump up. So it helps keep your builds across different environments. It's very standard.
Yep.
Um,
And you're copying these files in before you copy the rest of the code. Why is that?
yeah, we want to. the way the build engine works, I'll be loose with that, but it starts at the top and basically executes your commands and creates layers in your image, and they're read-only layers. And anytime a layer towards, I should say towards the bottom, because I think I'm being put on top for whatever reason, when that layer is invalidated, or if you change something, so if I change something in my package JSON, let's say I included, underscore, man, I don't even know what version, let's do 1.2 or whatever. I'm not going to run it. But if I had already built this, and then I do another build, my package JSON changed, so that cache, that layer gets invalidated, and Docker will
Yep.
rebuild it, and then all other layers below it, so line 6, 8, 10, and 12 will all be rebuilt. So that means if I was copying my code, this is where I'm copying my code into the image. If it's up at top, if I copy the code in, and then I start installing packages here, well, my code is going to be changed very frequent, right? I'm going to be coding test debugging, right? And every time I build my image, this cache is going to invalidate, and so it's going to do an npm install every time it tries to build your image. So
Yeah.
so what we want to do is move the files that you change the most often. You want to have them as far down in your Docker file as possible, and it still works, right? So that
Yep.
way, so we're running npm install once, and then just line 10 runs every time I change files, and they get copied into images, but these other layers will be cached.
Yep.
And then every once in a while, you might update and add a package. Yes, it'll rebuild, but that's a lot less frequent than changing code. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
And
idea there.
it's really about keeping that loop fast and not busting the cache.
Yeah,
Because as we'll see, as we go through this, we'll see um, the npm install is typically a dominating sort of step in a build. And the same thing goes with like apt-get. If you have apt installs or other sort of big, especially package, any package manager, Pi or pip, apt-get, any of those things, like try to break those into their own layers and try to put them up and make changes lower. I think and Omer had a good suggestion earlier, which is that you can also do this through inheriting images. So like if you've got something that's very fixed and never changes, you could effectively make that a new base image and then build off that. So like if all of your applications share something very common that almost never changes, you could make an image for that, and then everybody could use that image, and so you can specialize. That's something that
yeah,
you can get to later. But what you want to do is you want to keep all the changes as like close together as possible, and things that don't change, put them early, and then that way everything else will go faster later.
yeah, yeah. I like that. Creating your own base images to put all your tools in there. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, cool. So basic Docker file. Before we build that, let me jump back. Go ahead.
A bunch of common dependencies that are just always there, and so just put them in.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so jumping back to the code, we'll see that I have a database. I'm connecting to a database. So before let's build our image. So I'm going to do a Docker build dash notes service, and I'm going to give it the context we're in. If you look here, this is where my notes project is at. So we're sitting in that directory, and that Docker file is right in that directory. That's why I'm able to give the dot. So Docker build dash t. Oops. Notes service. Let's go ahead and run this. So there you see some caching. I must have built this before we jumped on, or did I build it earlier? But you'll see it's using cache. So
Yep.
here's the npm install, and then it's going to tell you what it's doing. It says, oh, okay, I'm using cache, and just keep going. I think that's fine. I don't want to run npm. It takes forever, especially
Yeah.
while we're live streaming. So here's our note service. Cool. So what I want to do, what I was shown in the code is we have a database. So we got to fire up a database Mongo local, right? So let's do that. Let's run it in a container. A couple things we got to think about though is if you're running independent containers, they're isolated in the network, right? So typically uh, when you start up Mongo, um, you're going to run it in the background, and then you're going to publish port 27017 is the default, right? And so we're going to publish that, and that's fine. So if I'm connecting locally from my machine, I'll be able to talk, I'll be able to connect on port 27017. But if you have two containers, each being isolated, they're not able to come in and back out, right? And so what we want to do is we want to create a network that we can put on our Mongo database. We can attach it to that network, and then we can run our application container, and we can attach it to that network, and then they can talk to each other. So I'm going to do that. I'm not going to type this all out. I have it written down. So let me copy that. and but I'll explain what I'm doing here in a sec. Okay, so same normal stuff. Interactive terminal. We're going to remove it when it stops automatically, and what we're going to run is a daemon. I'm going to come back to the volumes in a second, but I'm going to expose port 27017, publish that port, and then here I'm going to put it onto a network, right? And then we're going to name the container, and then we're going to start it. So let's go.
Yep.
Let's go and see if we have that network. So this is old. Let's actually get rid of that so we don't confuse. Docker. This is how you remove a network. Remove. Okay. I can never type Docker when we're on live.
That's funny.
Okay. So we don't have it. So let's create the network. So we're going to do network create and MongoDB. I believe that's the name of my network. Yep. Okay. So now if we list it, we have MongoDB, and there's network create help. There's a bunch of stuff that you can set when you're creating a
Yep.
network. I'm not going to go into it on this call, but okay. So now we have our network. So now we can start up our. Copy the command. So now we're going to set our. Now it'll attach to that network. One other thing I like to do is I set up volumes locally, and then I use that volumes anytime I run my containers, whether I'm using Compose, whether I'm using just running isolated containers for my database. That way, if Docker manages that volume, let me jump back a second, just real basic type stuff. So when you run an image, it's a read-only file system, right? It's layered on top. Well, I don't want to go too much into it, but suffice it to say, when you're running a container, you can write to disk, but when you stop and remove that container, that data goes away. It's not persisted.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
And that's fine if you want to fire up Mongo and maybe have a script that pre-populates your database. You can do that with volumes and stuff too. But right, every time you stop and remove that container, your data goes away. So what I like to do is use manage volumes, which Docker will manage, and then I don't have to, map stuff in from my local drive into the container and all that type of stuff. So Docker will manage it. It saves that data, and that data will persist.
Yep. And normally you can see if you go get an official image, you can see what volumes the official image uses. So like these are the Mongo volumes. If you would go get the MySQL one, you could see those.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it actually in the and you could read it in the Docker file too.
Yeah. And so it looks like Mongo uses two, one for the data and one for the config.
Yep. And I'm gonna remove these.
And that must be a best practice in the Mongo community is to split those two things out.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna do a create. I'm gonna do a MongoDB, and then I'm gonna create one for config. Okay. So now we have our two volumes, right? And then so now we're set up. we mapped our volumes inside the container. So we said use this named volume, MongoDB, and map it inside the container to DataDB. Same thing here, but the data config DB. And these are standard paths that Mongo sets up for storing its data.
Yep.
And then we've also connected to the network. So if we
Yep.
do a Docker PS and then do a Docker inspect Mongo, DB. And right down here at the bottom, you can see we're connected to the MongoDB network. And you see gateways and IP addresses and stuff. And what else is in here? There's our mounts. So we're mounting to the type as a volume. The name is MongoDB, MongoDB_config. And this is telling you where that data is stored. Now, when you're using Docker Desktop, if we navigated I'm on a Mac, so if we navigated on my Mac to var lib Docker volumes, you won't see that. This is inside the VM that Docker is managing. All right. Cool. So we have our database running. So let's start our application. So we built it. And again, let me pull this. So I'm going to Docker run, and then I'm going to expose port 8080. And then I'm going to tell my application what port it should listen on. And then I'm going to set the connection string.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell it MongoDB. And then I'm going to connect it to the network. And then I'm going to give it a name and then start up the container.
Yep.
Cool.
And so because of the name you gave MongoDB when you ran it, we're going to hook up that name inside for other people to find it.
Yep.
I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're running. We've connected. Let me pull up my little Insomnia app here. And let's see. I think get notes. So we're on port 80. So let's run that. I don't have anything in the database right now. So let's create.
So what's this little app that we're looking at? I've never seen this before.
Oh,
what is this?
Yeah, this is Insomnia. It's like a REST client that you can use. So you can create a new request, just name it whatever you want. Then you can choose the method you want to use. So you can do get post put. And then, so in this post for the create note, you can set up auth. So you can do a bearer token, put your token in here, those type of things. No authentication. Then you could tell it, what do you want to send JSON? Do you want to send XML? God forbid. Binaries. You can multi-part forms, all kinds of stuff, right? You could set up your headers. You can add headers and all that good stuff. So I don't know. I settled on Insomnia. I like the UI. I like the feature set.
Cool.
I use it very, very basically, right? Doing basically CRUD against the REST API, but
that's neat.
Yeah. So I think that worked.
I saw a couple logs.
Nope, I'm getting 404s. Did I run it? Port 80, 8080. It's getting the request.
Would you go look at the code for the app real quick?
Yeah. Oh, I changed this, that's why.
Yeah, you changed it to foo. I remember that in the very beginning.
Thank you. Pair programming. So let's do a Docker compose. Oh no, we're not using compose. Sorry. Let me build.
Yeah, you're giving away the secret of we're going to make this a lot easier in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to rebuild because we changed. And you can see how Chad was talking about before, how we set up our Docker file that it ran super fast. Because you can see use cache, using cache. But here on the copy, it didn't use it. So it copied that file in.
Yeah. And, making that inner loop fast is that's how you get a good flow going. If it takes forever, it's painful.
Yes. Okay, there we go. We don't have any. Come back.
Cool.
Got a success, but an empty payload. Let's create a note. Okay, there we created one. Let's just test it again. Back. There we go. Cool. All right. Success. So let me take this down. Let me clear. So now we still have Mongo running. So we can.
And you have volumes. So when you start again, you should see that data again.
Yep. I show that real quick. Nope. There's my Mongo. I'm going to start it back up. And then I'm going to start back up my Node service. There we go. Oops. We send. We still have data coming back.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Let's tear these down.
So that was a lot of work, right? That was create a network, create a couple volumes, do a build,
right.
Run two things, and remember a bunch of flags. And you could probably script some of that, but there's probably a better way.
Yeah. And the better way is to use. Thank you. That was nice. Set me up, Jeff. hopefully I don't miss. No. But yeah, you can use compose. So let's take a look. So Docker compose. So here's a compose I have that I've written before without some of this stuff in mind. You can see I'm connecting to a network here, and I'm connected to the external network, right? But I'm setting up my ports, same thing I typed out on the command line. So we're setting up our port, database connection, the network, all those type of things, right? So you can set that all up in your compose file. Let me pull up. I have one here for dev that has my database in it and volumes. So you start out with the version, set up your services. I don't want to spend too much time in compose, but basically you can, this is the way you tell Docker how you want your image to be run. And so we're setting up our build context, setting up our ports. I'm exposing 9229 that I'll show in a minute when we start to debug. And again, setting up my environment variables. And here I'm going to map in code, and I'll talk about this in a minute when we get into the debugging stuff. But let's just run that and start. And then I'm going to tell it what command to run when you run this this image. And the reason I'm going to do that, and so if you look in the package JSON, so we just ran when the image started before. It took this command. It just ran node server.js. But in my compose file, I want to be able to show how I can code with this. And one of the tools you can use to live reload to keep reloading is nodemon. So you'll see here in the scripts file, my start script uses nodemon. So that's why I changed this command that'll overwrite the command in the Docker file. So I'm going to do an npm run start. That'll start up nodemon with server.js, and it'll watch for all your files changing. And when a file's changed, it will update it. And then down here, I have Mongo database and 4.2.8, exposing the port, normal port, and then I'm setting up my volumes just like we did on the command line. Now these volumes, you can see I've named them MongoDB and MongoDB_config. And so that's the same as these names here. But the way Compose does it is when it fires up, it's going to use the name of the directory that you're in. So it'll look at notes-services. Then it's going to put an underscore. And then it's going to start naming all my containers using the service name, and then an underscore for the count of the container. And same with volumes. So when we fire up this in Compose, this volume that it'll create these two volumes, but they won't be the same as these volumes that I created here, because Compose will prefix the volumes with notes-service underscore MongoDB underscore MongoDB config. So I'm going to leave that as like that. You can, I believe in here, showing like on networks where you can use an external network and not that one Compose creates for you when it runs. You can do the same thing with volumes. You can use an external volume. But for
Yep.
simplicity, I just want to leave it like this.
Yep.
Cool. So I think we got everything there. So let's run this compose file. And what I'm going to do is, because I know I'm going to mess this up, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it into here. So just comment this out. Okay. That way I don't have to type -F for a different compose file. Okay. So let's see what we have running. We don't have anything running. So I'm going to do a Docker compose. And I'm going to do an up, and I'm going to give it a --build. You could do just a build and then a compose up. I'm going to
Yep.
do an up --build. So that'll tell compose to build the images in your compose file. So same thing we saw before. It's reading in the Docker file. How it finds the Docker files based on this context, right?
Yep. And there was a question about that. So in this case, context is a slightly overloaded term. There's context as in where does this Docker command go? But then in this case, there's a build context. And I hadn't ever really thought about the fact that we use that word in two places. So the build context in this place is where's the Docker file and where's the code. And that lets you have like multiple Docker files in the same. Like if you have a Compose project that has multiple directories and you have multiple Docker files, you can tell Compose like go build this app in this directory with this Docker file, or go build this part in this directory with that Docker file. But that's a question is like, is it? Do we have to set the context? Isn't it already set? And like, I get it. Like, it's not Docker context like the Docker run context. It's a build context.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so we're up and running. We're listening on port 8080. And you can see here, so compose, I didn't run it as a daemon in the background. I just let it run. And so it'll pipe all the logs to standard out. And it prefixes your container name. So notes _1, Mongo _1. And you can see right here that we started it with Nodemon server.js. And then you can see Nodemon pumps this out and says, we're watching you, Node. So we're listening on 8080. We're using the connection string. I don't normally dump out connection strings and secrets to the console, but this will never go into production anywhere. And you can see here I'm using in the connection string Mongo. So if you look in the compose file, so here's where it's getting its connection string. And I'm using Mongo in the connection string because the service is named Mongo. And so compose will fire up. It'll create a little DNS service, and you're able to discover containers that are on there. And I'm going to show this real quick. So let me bump this up. So Docker PS, you can see, sorry folks, when I bump this up, it just expands my terminal.
Got to get those bindings.
Yeah, I know how to do. Here, what? There we go, full screen on me. Oh, no. Docker PS, thank you. Okay. So you can see we have the notes service _notes1 _mongo1. And if I take, so Docker inspect, and I'm going to inspect this container. And you'll see right here on the networks that we're connected to the notes service _default network. So Compose also spins up a network and attaches your containers to it. And then it'll set an alias for you. So you can see here the alias is Mongo. So that's how we're able to use Mongo as the service name to discover. Okay, so we're running. Let's test things out. So let's get some notes. And they're empty like we expected. The reason being is, all right, so let me clear and do Docker volume ls. So before we created these volumes and stored stuff in them, but as we're running in Compose, it prefixed these volumes with Node.js service underscore. That's why our database is empty right now. But we can create again.
Yeah.
Let's create a couple in there, and then you can get your notes back. So there we go. Cool. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show here. So we took all those commands that we wrote on the command line. So all these Docker run, all of this stuff, and there could be more, right? You can think about it, you're passing in a bunch of environment variables. You don't want to have to type those all in. You can use .environment files and all that good stuff, but it just becomes. And if you were, creating volumes in your run command, all kinds of stuff, your run commands just get very long. So that's where Compose comes in and makes it super easy to put all those commands together. And then you could actually share that out, right? You can share your Compose file with everybody. Okay, cool. And since we ran npm start run and we're using NodeMon, if I come in here and do a server use, if anybody's wondering, this just sits right on top of Express. So the Ronin commands are very similar to Express. So, and then I'm going to return response.json, and let's send back foo : bar. Let me save that, and we should see that restarting due to changes. So it restarted it, connected back to the database. Now it's listening, and we're getting our employee notes back. I think this is one. Yeah. So now I'm just going to go to foo, which is that route that I just did, created here. Send that off, and we get foo bar back. So I just live, changed code. I didn't have to recompile. I didn't have to rebuild my image, restart Compose, all that type of stuff. It was able to pick up those changes. One of the reasons it was able to find my code and be able to watch it is because I created a volume here, and I did a bind mount, basically. So I bound local on my machine, the current directory, so that's my note service, into /code. And the reason I mapped it into code is because that's where in the Docker file that my code lives. That's my working directory. That's where NodeMon will be run. So when you set a working directory, all the commands below it will use that as its directory. So you'll see I take copy package.json, which is local, and I put it into package.json. But I didn't give it any kind of absolute path, right? I didn't do that because I'm using a working directory. I'm sitting in the code directory right now. And that's where, when I did a dot here, that put all my source code into code. So that's why I map my local directory into code. And now that'll watch it. And every time something changes on my disk, it'll update into the container. And NodeMon will pick that up and restart. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going kind of fast at the end here because we're coming close to an hour. But all right, so that's running. Let's tear it down. And I'm going to do a Docker compose down. So you'll see here that it removed the network. It removed our images, containers, sorry, and removed our network. But if we look at volumes, you can see our volumes are still there. It won't remove your volumes auto-magically. It leaves them there in case you restart. You want to have your data persisted, right? So you don't have to create testing data every time. Okay, so we're going to change one thing. So if we look at our package.json, you'll see that I have this debug script. What that is, it starts Node, passes in the inspect break. The inspect is basically tells Node go into debug mode, and listen on localhost, basically port 9229. And so debuggers are able to connect on that port. The dash BRK for break means break right away. And so let's modify our compose to use debug, because we're gonna attach a debugger here. Okay. So I'm gonna do a Docker compose up again. Let me scroll back up. And you can see it's recreated that network, right? And then created our containers. Let's see, are we listening? Everything's okay. So we ran Node, and now it's telling us the debugger's listening. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to open up Chrome. Go bigger, and I'm going to go localhost. Let's go 8080-foo. I didn't delete that, did I? Oh. What happened? Aren't we listening? Of course things are going to break.
It's demos.
Did I spell it right? Yep. Ay, ay, ay. Let me pull this down. Port 8080, connection trace. Oops. Let me start this up.
Ready?
Let's wait for it to connect. Looks like they're both running. Ah, there we go. Okay, listen on port 80. Okay, that worked. Take them down. Debug. Why don't you want to play? All right, let's run it.
Let's try it again. Push that rock up the hill.
I'm going to do a build. Not going to matter, but come on, Node, you can do it. Wait for it. Oh, you got to be kidding me.
It's not starting? Interesting.
No.
Well, it says it's starting.
Yeah, it's starting, but it's not connecting. I don't know if it's just taking a bit. That is really weird.
Is this where I make a slow joke?
Yeah.
Node, Mongo, slow.
Yeah, but is it, is it internet scale? That video, that meme is old.
It is showing our age.
You know what?
So when you hit localhost, what does it say? It just says no
Yeah,
traffic.
yeah,
Not passing any traffic.
yeah. We're getting just nada, no connection.
Interesting.
What did I want to start? I wanted to do. Sorry, massive flipping back and forth here. Start. I don't need to build.
We're gonna do a phone a friend in a second.
Yeah, I was seeing if it was. Oh, there it goes. Well, let's do this. I know package JSON. I was doing this with. We got to wait for it to.
And that seemed to go.
What needs to. What we're waiting for is. There it goes. Okay, there's our connection. Just waiting to see that, and then listening for it to 8080. That's basically what gets dumped out here.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know why the node command was not working. That's weird. Okay, cool. So let's connect. So do about, inspect, and then I'm going to do open dedicated dev tools for Node. Here's the tricky part: is always getting that first little connection. So I'm going to stop this. Oh, come on. Chad, that's worked 2 minutes before I got on the call. Wow.
Demos. It's
Okay, well, let's see if we can figure
fantastic.
this out here. Um, watch, they're gonna as soon as the live stream catches up with everybody watching, we're gonna get a bunch of stuff in the chat. Um, Let me make sure that's went into. Oh, I don't see it in. I don't see in a lot.
Oh yeah, I don't see
Yeah,
the
debug mode, right?
the debug port, whatever the debug extension thingy.
Yeah. MD run. Ugh, that's why.
Oh yeah, that'll do it. That will do it.
There we go. Boom. Thank you. Okay, cool. Did I still have my foo bar in there? Yes. Right? Yeah, cool. Okay. So since I did the dash dash inspect dash BRK, once it connects, it breaks. So that's why I'm stopped
Yep.
right here on the first line. Let's run that. Okay. Now let me pull up my terminal so we can see that. So we can see here debugger is attached. And I'm going to send it to foo because that's where we're my breakpoint. I have, sorry, in Chrome. Let's make this bigger so people can see it. Is that better? Close that down.
Yeah, looks
Okay,
good.
cool.
Yeah.
So you can see I have a breakpoint here on line 20, which is listening on the path foo, and then we should break right here. So let's send that. Boom. All right. Cool. We can't hear the crowd clapping. All of our live,
Yeah.
they're going nuts right now. Uh,
I think
but
I
it's
am
very go ahead.
I'm always impressed when things work.
Yeah.
And that's just, that doesn't have to do with just demos. It's just computers in general. I'm always impressed when stuff actually works.
Yeah.
So you hit like this. So I'm not a web developer. I don't typically debug, but this feels like a just feels like a normal debugger.
Yeah. I mean, this
Like or
is
what I'm used to, like back in the old days when I used to write C. Like this feels like it's just a debugger.
yeah. Yeah. So you have everything you need right inside here in Chrome. So you can see your threads. You can set up watches.
Yep.
Um, you have your call stack, which gets fun with callbacks and all that type of stuff. But then
Sure.
here's your local scope, so we can see our request and our response is getting called in to this function here, this anonymous function. It's passing in request and response, and then you can see there you can hover over, so we can see the request. We could probably see here's the request. We could see foo. We could see the body is empty because I did a get. Um, you can see all your headers, right? You have access to everything. It's nice. You can go and inspect everything. You could set breakpoints, obviously. Um, Yeah, so it works great. You can turn on and off your breakpoints. You can even do conditional breakpoints. Um, you can edit the breakpoint. You can put in inspection expressions, excuse me, right in here. So if you're in a loop, right, and you want it to break on number 52 when your counter equals 52, you can set your
Yep.
conditional in there. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so it's full blown uh, debugger. And while actually connecting and exposing Node in a container, the basic things you need to do is um, start Node in debug mode, and you do that with the um, dash dash inspect, and then you can tell it what port, um, what host, what port, IP, all that type of stuff. This is kind of the default standard 9229. So number one thing you do is start Node in debug mode, so it'll listen on 9229 for any debuggers, right? And fire that up. You can run a single container with that. Um, yeah, and then you go into Chrome, and what you do in Chrome is you go to about inspect, right? And that'll bring up this screen. And then all I did is hit the open dedicated dev tools for Node extension.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and that brought up my debugger window. What a lot of times what I'll do is then just close this down, right? And use Chrome here as kind of extension of my, I used to use this a lot when I used Sublime as my text editor, and I use Chrome as my debugger.
Yep.
With
That makes
VS
sense.
Code, we're a little bit out of time, but VS Code can connect also. It's a little bit more tricky. The extension's kind of set up to fire up a dev container. It has some things running inside that container, so the two of them can, VS Code and the container, can talk. It's a little more seamless, um, but yeah, we should do that at some time too.
And there's lots of, I think this is sort of like the starter, right? Like there's lots more
Yeah,
there's complicated setups that folks have with multiple compose files and
yeah,
uh, mounting the actual code as a volume so that like iWatch kind of iNotifications kind of work and that kind of thing, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or I guess that works. Yeah, you can get like the live edit, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it can get complicated, and there's a whole bunch of ways you could set up your local development, right? So you can. So I have. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I think I have it. Like I have this dev images, and I have one for Node 1218, right? And so sometimes too, what you can do is you can set up a dev image that houses all your tools that you need for development, all your if you were compiling C++, all that type of stuff. The specific Node version that you want inside of that container. Let's say you have an old legacy app that's Node 8 or whatever. I don't know, wouldn't consider Node 8 legacy, but you get the point.
Yep.
And you need to, so you can create an image. Um, this is basically, I add Nano and Vim. I like Nano because um, my beard isn't long enough to use Vim. But 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 I like Vim too.
Colon WQ. It works.
Yeah,
Shift ZZ.
yeah,
I promise you will escape. You will escape the Vim.
yeah. But yeah. So you can see I'm just pulling from the base, the official image Node 12.18.3, and it has Node in there, npm, everything I need. And so actually, if we do Docker build called dev node, you can see it pulling down from Debian packages. It's going to install those things. We don't have to wait for an npm install, so this runs,
Relatively
yeah,
fast.
relatively fast. And then if I just do a Docker run, it rm, if I need to expose ports, right, I can do ports 3000, 3000. And then I map my volume. I'll do the local directory into code. Whoops, into code, and give it a name, dev. and Node. I think I called it Node Dev, or did I call it Dev Node? We shall see, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, can't find it. Ah. Oh, that's right.
There you go.
So I didn't give it a command to run, right? And so the node, if we go look at the base image, I think we looked at it earlier. The default command is node.
Yep.
Um,
Makes sense.
yep. So let me drop out of there. So if I just run node on the command line, it's the exact same thing we just saw in the container. So what I do
Yep.
is then I just run bash, and now I'm inside my container, uh,
Yeah.
and all my commands are available. So we can touch, or let's see if I get this right. Index.js and console log hello world. Didn't like it.
Didn't like that.
Let's go here. Why? Okay, fine.
So while we're doing that, and we start to wrap
There we
up,
go.
if there are sort of more advanced topics around Node development that y'all would like to see, just ping Peter or myself, um, either on Twitter or somewhere else. What I think what I'd like to do is eventually have a Git repository where folks can file issues or PRs about topics they'd like to see, because I think that would be an easier way to get that submitted. But for now, just ping us on Twitter and say, hey, it'd be cool if we could talk about multi-stage builds or whatever the sort of next gen topics that you all would like to talk about for more advanced things. Or if there's other topics you'd like to see, other frameworks or languages you'd like to get covered, or just things in general. Next week, we're going to talk about Awesome Compose, and we're going to do some more on the ECS plugin that we have, the Amazon ECS plugin that we're working on as part of the beta. We'll do some more. We can definitely tackle some other things in that example. So ping us between now and next Wednesday, and next Wednesday at 10, we'll be back and we'll talk about Awesome Compose some more.
Cool. Oh, I was hoping this would be done by the time you finished. But yeah, what Chad was talking,
Yeah.
I was just running. So I created that index.js. I use Nano, my favorite editor, and then ran it so you can see hello world. And then I did npx create React app. So npx will run. It'll pull down the create React app module and then execute it for you, so you don't have to install things globally. But yeah, so it's setting up the React base application from create React app, and once this is done, you could do a npm start, and you're inside a container, and it appears to be, if you didn't know, if I go back and forth, the only difference that I see really is just the way I've blinged out my terminal. And you can do the same. I have a bash file in here, but I'm not copying it, and it's empty, right? So you can configure this any way you want. You can copy those files in using your Docker file into that image. So you can customize your terminal, do all kinds of things. But yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, I'm just going to let this run, and I think that's it. I appreciate everybody
Yeah. Awesome.
joining. Thank you very much.
So yeah, real quick. There are ways to run containers without privileges. So couple things off the bat is like just use a different user in the Docker file. We're wrapping up here, but and then also you can search for Docker rootless, and there's ways to run the daemon in a rootless way. So that's a good place to start.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's wrap up.
Well, I'm good. Thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Chad, for joining me again. I love doing this, and we'll
Yeah.
see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.